Okay, the next person on the program is Joseph Calhoun, and he is a documentary film producer. His background is that he's a broadcast journalist since 1979, and he's worked at KZUM-FM in Lincoln, New England, and also KGNU in Boulder, Colorado. Anyone hear about those places? Okay, great. So you're listening in. And then in 1992, worked with the Empowerment Project in the famous documentary, The Panama Deception. How many have seen that? He was a major part in documenting and producing this. Of course, Barbara Trent was the director, and it won the Academy Award for the Best Documentary in 1993. So, the topic tonight for Joseph is the 1993 World Trade Center attacks. The format is he's going to speak for 15 minutes about this clip, which he secured the day of that it was actually aired on ABC, I believe. And then it was yanked, and no one could get copies of it after that point, and he just happened to catch it. So we're going to see exclusive footage that you can't find anywhere else. And then he's going to actually show that 15-minute clip after his presentation and then wrap up for 30 seconds. So please help me welcome Joseph Calhoun.
I was a student at the University of Nebraska in the late 60s. And it was in the summer of, it was in the fall, winter of 1969, that a bus of hippies came through Lincoln, and they were arrested by the FBI. They were charged with trying to blow up the Nebraska state capitol. It made news around the world. That's the first time I heard about terrorists, a bus of hippies. And it made news around the world, and they, a few weeks later, however, I was in the Nebraska Student Union, and the leader of the terrorist group was in the student union drinking coffee with a friend. And so I asked a friend of mine, well, what's that all about? And the guy smiled and he says, well, it became pretty obvious to the law enforcement agencies that the only person that was talking about bombing the Nebraska state capitol was the FBI informant on the group. And so the charges were dropped. In 1973, I had to apply for a passport because I was going abroad. It was the first time I ever applied for a passport, and I guess they don't do this. I don't know if they still do this. Maybe they do. But at the time I formally applied for my first passport, I had to raise my right hand and swear to uphold the Constitution of the United States and protect it from all enemies, foreign and domestic. And I forgot about that for a long time until I started preparing myself for this speech. Because the domestic terrorists far eclipse the foreign terrorists that we have these terrorist alerts about. The mentors and the masters of terrorism are the ones far eclipse their protégés and apprentices. Anyway, in 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed. The Berlin Wall fell down. And in 1992, the big campaign message was, we're going to have this big peace dividend. Billions of dollars for social programs, health care, schools, etc. And there was talk about, why do we need NATO anymore? We don't need a big budget for the CIA. And so the big talk was that, we're going to have this big peace dividend. Well, Bush Sr. did not get reelected. Bill Clinton got elected, and he was inaugurated in January of 1993. A month later, the World Trade Center is bombed, and all of a sudden there is a big need for the CIA again. There's a big need for a military budget again. So the peace dividend literally went up in smoke. But I thought that was kind of strange. And so I kind of watched this story, that all of a sudden we have a terrorist attack, the first terrorist attack on the United States by a foreign entity. And the story was strange at the very beginning. The first person they arrested, and this was because of field agents, real FBI agents that did their job, they found the serial number of the axle of the van that blew up in the World Trade Center. They traced it to a rental agency, and the first person they arrested was Mr. Salome, who had rented the van, and he was there trying to get his deposit back on the van. And I thought, this is strange. I wonder if that individual even knew why he rented that van for, or who he rented it for. And so I said, I'm going to keep my ear to the ground on this story. Well, they arrested a number of individuals, Egyptians, I think one Palestinian, one person from Sudan, but it all centered around this blind Muslim cleric in New Jersey, Sheikh Abdul Rahman. And they never arrested him for 3 months. Janet Reno said there wasn't enough evidence against him. Well, I happened to be on the internet back in the early 90s, and I subscribed to this news service, which someone recommended me to subscribe to, and it put files of news stories I'd be interested in this file, and I'd look at them every day from all over the world. And so I was mostly concentrated with cocaine in the CIA in Central America at the time. And I saw this dispatch from Cairo, Egypt. And I thought, well, what's that all about? This usually isn't in this particular file. And it was an Associated Press file, and you'll see it on the screen tonight. And it was the president of Egypt, Hosni Mubarak. The basic gist of it has claimed that Sheikh Abdul Rahman, who's been suspected in the World Trade Center bombing, is a paid CIA agent. I thought, wow, that is breaking news. That should be on CNN. That story never made the light of day, and that was May 28, 1993. Nowhere. Within 24 hours, Sheikh Abdul Rahman was arrested for immigration violations. Well, I kept my ear to the ground on this story, and in July that year, there were 2 news programs that came on. One was a British special report from the IATN News that was on public TV, and an ABC News program called Day One that had a special. And in both specials, the claim was made that all of the bombers in the World Trade Center in 1993, all the people that participated in that bombing, had been on the payroll of the CIA. And they had been on the payroll of the CIA in Afghanistan. Well, they had the FBI, the CIA made the claim that, and they got away with it, their little plausible deniability. Well, gee, we trained these people. We didn't know they would come back and bomb the World Trade Center. And they got off the hook just by making this lame excuse like that. And I thought, this is a major story, but once again, it's a program you see, you hear, you say that's very interesting, and there's no follow-up. Well, I found out that the story got even a little better. There happened to be actually one person that wasn't on the CIA payroll. He was the FBI informant by the name of Imad Salem. Not only did he organize the group, he made the bomb that blew up in the World Trade Center. He got paid $1 million for his testimony during the trial, and the rest of them are in prison. That would have made major news. It would have been a major news story. But no one was following the trial of the World Trade Center bombers. The trial was held in 1995, and all of us had a pleasant diversion. We were all watching the trial of O.J. Simpson. You never heard about this trial, hardly at all. Well, anyway, that gets to September 11th, 2001. And I was working near Colorado Springs at the time when I heard the news. And immediately, I remembered this program I saw in 1993 about the CIA connection to the World Trade Center bombers. And so my suspicion was I suspected there was more to the story than what we were being fed on the news. And I remembered that program. And I went to Washington, D.C. 18 days later to attend a demonstration against the World Trade Organization with the Answer Coalition. And I was in New York City and visited the studios of Democracy Now! And visited the site where the World Trade Center went down 18 days after September 11th. While I was in New York, I contacted ABC News Archives because I remembered that program. And I talked to the secretary and I said, could I get a copy of this program that was broadcast in July 1993? Something about the World Trade Center bombing in 1993. The secretary on the phone says, okay, let me look it up. Oh, here it is. Yeah, here it is. Do you want a video copy or a transcript? I said, both. She says, okay, I'll order it for you. She says, wait a minute. There's something wrong here. She says, a video copy or transcript of this program is no longer for sale and no longer available. And I thought, that's strange. And so I did a little bit of follow-up, and actually it wasn't, you'll see it said ABC News Archives in New York City. They actually are in Scottsdale, Arizona, I found out. So I asked why, and they didn't know why you could no longer get a copy or a transcript of the program. And so I did they gave me some numbers to call, and I got transferred to another number. They finally gave me over to their legal department. And I got a voice message saying that if you want a copy of this program, you have to write out how you're going to use it, what you want it for, and if we do not give it to you, you will need a court subpoena to get a copy of this program. Well, I have a copy of the program. And you can view the entire program upstairs. But what I have is clips. The reason I have a copy of the program is it's because one of those news items that if you don't put your finger on the VCR the day it's broadcast, you'll never see it again. So what you're going to see is some clips from that program shortly. First you're going to see actually is the ITN report, the full report, and then you're going to see clips of the program Day One with Forrest Sawyer and John Hockenberry. The program, and it was a surprise to me the day it was broadcast, was produced by Leslie Colburn. And I thought, how did that program get under the radar of ABC News? Because Leslie Colburn was the woman who wrote Out of Control about the Contra-drug connection to the drug connection to our Contra war with Nicaragua. Anyway, I have a few more minutes, and I'd like, before we get to the film, and I'd like to say that in July 2002, there was a terrific opportunity for the press to uncover the story about 911. And in the July 3rd issue of Time, you had these headlines, The Bombshell Memo. It was about the real FBI agents that do their job. And this was about the Colleen Riley memo, where she had all the facts about Zacharias Moussaoui, tried to send them to Washington, tried to alert our government what was going on, and they completely rebuffed her and told her there there was nothing to the case. And I'll just quote what she said in part of that memo. If I can find it here. Basically, everyone's first question was why. Why would an FBI agent deliberately sabotage a case? I know I shouldn't be flippant about this, but jokes were made that the key FBI headquarters personnel had to be spies or moles like Robert Hansen, who were actually working for Osama bin Laden, to have so undercut the Minneapolis effort. Well, President Bush, even at that time when this story broke, was asked if he knew what he knew and when he knew it about 911, and he denied, of course, he knew anything about anything prior, before 911. And I thought the press is going to go after him. But something else happened in July that diverted the press. A little girl was lost in Utah. A little girl was kidnapped in Utah. And the entire press went to Utah to cover the kidnapping of Elizabeth Smart. And that's all you heard in June. I was at a demonstration against the FBI and the Justice Department in June in 2002. And I passed the lawn of the White House where they have the White House press corps. It was mothballed with flags waving. There was no one covering this story at all. So anyway, if we're going to indict or work for the impeachment of individuals, we should also include elements of the media who are complicit. There was something else that I was going to get to about people ask me, do you think our government would actually kill our own people? And I can't talk about this right now, but there was a scandal about the Contra War called the CIA's Nicaraguan Manual. And this manual was a scandal at the time because it calls for killing some of your own supporters, and this is the Contra supporters in Nicaragua, killing some of your own supporters and blaming it on the enemy. So it's actually, there's a written document that does instruct the killing of civilians for political propaganda. Anyway, I'll present the video clip now.
The outbreak of terrorism is the legacy of years of United States support for the Mujahideen guerrillas in Afghanistan.
Today, the city within a city known as the World Trade Center is back to work. Security has been tightened. Yet this is an extraordinary place that handles 70,000 people coming and going on the average day. And there is no way to guarantee absolutely their safety. Impossible not to feel that even today, the havoc and the blind panic such a bomb in such a building must have created. What happened on a wet Friday lunchtime in February has scarred everyone who works here.
Well, I think people's lives changed on the 26th of February. It's given us a heightened awareness of global terrorism. It has touched our shores. We know that we have to deal with it.
Down in what was the car park, where the bombers left a 1,500-pound device in a hired van, they're still rebuilding the basement floors, blown away in a matter of seconds. From that moment, from the very beginning, the Americans were convinced this was not a one-off attack from an isolated group of eccentric extremists. What they found, however, is a new breed of terrorist, inspired more by religious zealotry than political goals.
Along the way, there have been some very shocking discoveries for the FBI and the police. Chief among them, the United States once trained and financed those who came to the World Trade Center back in February to leave that car bomb here in the basement.
Mohammed Salome, the bomber who bizarrely went back to pick up his deposit on the rented van that carried the bomb, was the first to be arrested. He's a Palestinian from Jordan. Others who've since been detained here are Egyptian, Sudanese, and some of them have been American citizens for several years. Yet there is one experience that links them all.
There's a thread, a common thread that runs through it, and that is they're all one way or another people who were connected to or participated in the war in Afghanistan. Not Afghans, but people who were either recruited to assist or recruited to participate or participated in camps where people were trained to fight in Afghanistan.
And who was running those camps? Who was
this stuff was being done by Pakistanis and ISI, who were in effect managing the Afghan war for the United States, with very considerable assistance, financial support, and management ideas from the United States.
ISI is the Pakistani intelligence service which recruited and trained Muslim warriors of the Mujahideen for the war in Afghanistan. Always with the help of America's CIA on the ground, and $3 billion worth of financial and material support from the American government.
You were a nation of heroes.
It was all part of Ronald Reagan's crusade to drive the Soviets out of Afghanistan. Yet even as Mr. Reagan was welcoming Mujahideen leaders to the White House in the spring of 1988, this covert war in Afghanistan was backfiring on the United States.
In the name of Allah, the gracious, the most merciful.
This is Sheikh Omar Abdul Rahman, an Egyptian cleric who first started coming to the United States at that time. The Sheikh recruited Islamic warriors, as he calls them. He went to Afghanistan himself on American-funded trips in 1989 and 1990. But it seems now that he was working all the while with the Iranians as well, specifically with Iran's Revolutionary Guards, helping them build training camps for guerrillas in Sudan once the Afghan war was over. Their targets today, President Mubarak's secular pro-Western government in the Sheikh's native Egypt, and America, starting with New York City. Until his arrest last week for being the spiritual leader of the World Trade Center bombers, the Sheikh was living in nearby New Jersey and preaching openly the politics of militant Islam.
These people don't hate us for the friends we have, they hate us for who we are. And that's a much more fundamental problem. Fundamental for Americans, much more difficult to understand.
And what are the targets as a result?
The targets, so far as we can tell, from what we've seen, are largely symbolic. The World Trade Center disrupting the financial center, going after tunnels and infrastructure targets. And basically, they're just trying to send a message of hatred for what America stands for. The great Satan, the great corrupter, the den of thieves and fornicators, as Sheikh calls us.
It was 30-odd years ago, after President Kennedy ordered the disastrous Bay of Pigs invasion of Cuba, that America first detected the price to be paid for covert support of wars abroad. The CIA told John Kennedy, "We have a disposal problem, Mr. President. What are we to do now with the Cuban exiles we trained to overthrow Castro?" In the 1970s, those Cuban exiles turned up as the men who burgled the Watergate for President Nixon's advisors, and so sparked up the scandal that brought down the president. 20 years on from that,
The problem we have up front is the world has become so tight, both in terms of communication and transportation. You can't guarantee that the people who you've trained or taught or shown the techniques of terror, revolution, and upset, you can't keep them where you'd like them kept. They have a funny way of, when they're unemployed and underemployed, finding their way back.
finding their way back to cities like New York, where today the FBI is warning that no public building can afford not to impose new security, and where tens of thousands of people have recently been using other routes in and out of Manhattan, keeping away from the bridges and the tunnels named by the Islamic extremists as their next target.
I'd like to begin with a day one investigation that will tell you something about terrorism in the 1990s. It starts with the bombing of the World Trade Center. That incident and other conspiracies to bomb New York City are a warning to the U.S. that we are looking at a new brand of terrorist. The suspects captured in New York make up an unlikely group of alleged terrorists, cab drivers, stock clerks, a gas station attendant, apparently operating on their own with no single cause or sponsor. But it turns out that one nation did, in fact, unwittingly pay to train some of these people, and at one time supplied them and others like them with billions of dollars in weapons. That nation is the United States, and it all goes back to the U.S. involvement in the Afghanistan war. John Hockenberry's investigation took him to Afghanistan. How could it be that the U.S. could have funded terrorists? The United States was involved in the war in Afghanistan for a very simple reason. The Soviets invaded Afghanistan. It was the last act of the Cold War. And we called the fighters, the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, freedom fighters. They were on our side. The trouble is, thousands of them from all over the world were Islamic fundamentalists. Democratic Congressman Charles Wilson of Texas made the holy war in Afghanistan his personal crusade. He worked with the CIA and the White House to back the Mujahideen with resources only a superpower could deliver. How much money was spent?
Well, those particular numbers are still classified, but just rough ballpark numbers, we took it from about 25 to 30 million a year to several billion a year.
The bombing of the World Trade Center in February of this year, the CIA as a covert war comes home. The man who received more U.S. assistance than any other fundamentalist leader was also the most anti-American. Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, the CIA's billion-dollar freedom fighter, is now the prime minister, and he's grateful for the help of foreign governments, including the U.S. If the State Department's former anti-terrorism chief didn't think this was much of a problem, maybe that explains why, after years of doing nothing, it took the bombing of the World Trade Center before anyone paid attention. Since the bombing, the U.S. government's urging, Pakistan has begun rounding up Arab fundamentalists.
We've been arrested. We had a very hard time here with the Pakistani government being arrested. They were put inside prison, and we have been denied access to our relatives and everything.
Pakistanis say it was terrorists.
Pakistanis have been giving us the arms were being trained on their guns by their own army on the blessing of America.
They say that it was all an accident.
How many CIA officers have been sacked for this?
It was all an accident.
How many CIA officers have been sacked for this?
It was all an accident.
How many CIA officers have been sacked for this?
The CIA was doing more than just giving training and assistance during the war. It was handing out U.S. visas and green cards to fundamentalists in return for their cooperation, according to Egyptian intelligence officials. The U.S. denies it actively aided any known terrorists.
We don't want to cause any problem for anyone in the world.
If an Egyptian cab driver in New York with an American green card came to Afghanistan, fought along with the Mujahideen, and learned how to make bombs, and went back to New York, to Jersey City, New Jersey, rented a truck, filled it with explosives, and blew up the World Trade Center, whose responsibility is that?
The name was that.
And besides him?
That Egyptian. The one who has provided him a green card. The one who has provided him a green card. The one who has provided him a green card.
Afghanistan is going to be a big headache in the region and also for the West. Are you saying that Americans should be afraid of the potential of terrorism coming from here?
I'm not saying they have to be afraid, but I'm saying that it's reality. It is coming. They have to face it, not to afraid. It's not a warning. It is coming.
What about all the fighters that were in the war? Where are they now?
I guess it's as good as mine. I think they're all over the world.
Well, everyone, welcome back after that dramatic video, and thank you very much, Joseph Calhoun, for capturing that and showing it to us. I sure hope that we can... I sure hope we can get clips for those of us in alternative media to spread around to others to show that dramatic footage. And so that's well done, Joseph.